Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another conversation with another exciting guest to help us figure out another aspect of life and the world around us so that we know how to get things just right. Today, our focus is going to be about banking and economic development and entrepreneurial development, everything a banking structure and a banking environment facilitates. And to join me in this conversation is somebody who started off as a banker when I started off as a banker at Standard Chartered Bank in Sri Lanka. We've known each other for over 33 years. I think it's going on 34 years. So it's been a long time. And we've both been in the banking industry. He comes from a banking world that goes beyond Sri Lanka to the Middle East and global impact. So I am excited, Shanka, to have you on this conversation, on this Goldilocks episode. Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Oh, thank you, Kasri. It's good to be here.
Shanka Abeywardene, it is a difficult name. It's a Sri Lankan name. As we get started, Shankar, talk to us a little bit about how your banking career has changed over the years because the world has evolved and we're in a different place today.
Absolutely. I started my banking career with Standard Chartered and I was attached to a branch. And I think that has gone a long way in how it has molded my career. It gave me a very good grounding on how the bank works, what does the customer require, and what do they come to a bank for. From there, I moved on to finance function. And so at that time, it was more bookkeeping and reporting function. But I think in Standard Chartered, it was evolving anyway to be positioned as a business finance partner, where they partner with the business to ensure that the bank is heading in the right direction. And that is how career got molded. I got more involved in the technology, data side, and how the business works. So today I'm the CFO of one of smaller banks in Sri Lanka. But my role, when I compare it to my CFO when I was at Standard Chartered, I think it's vastly different. Today, my role is more aligned as a change catalyst and a strategist. I am like the right hand of the CEO, so we drive strategy together. Because I believe that the CFO's role is if to put it very simply, it's about allocating scarce resources for the best return for the organization. And in doing that, the CFO needs to be very, very tech savvy. How do I change efficiencies? How do I manage risk? Where, I mean, I can go with a product which has the highest return, but it may also have the highest risk. So how do I get those matrices in? How do I compare one against the other? What does the future look like? Forecasting. So it's less technical accounting role anymore because you have enough and more ERP solutions. You have auditors to do that part. So the role has now evolved to how do we drive the business and bring in that financial insight into making those critical decisions. I enjoy what I'm doing. It has evolved in the direction that I always wanted it to go in. It's about transforming the organization from a product centric to a customer centric, solution driven organization.
Glad to hear that. So we're both CFOs talking to one another. So that is a interesting conversation by itself. Now, developing countries have a high dependency on banks and the economic impact banks are creating and how customer centric and socially responsible banks are. We came out of a bank that was very much that way. Standard Chartered Bank was very focused on community. I remember when we were at the bank, when people had a baby, when somebody got married, the priest and the banker were the ones who were invited, right? So we come from a tradition where banker is supposed to be responsible, supposed to be shaping the economic development of the environment. So as you look at your role in its current evolved state, Shankar, with technology, with strategy, with driving impact for the business, not just profitability, impact in a sustainable way. Let's look at the flip side. How is that positively impacting the economy, the entrepreneurial endeavor, and lifting society up?
So it's a very, very interesting topic, and it's something which I think most bankers miss out, very sadly to say, because today bankers are more focused on short-term profit versus long-term sustainable growth. When I go for orientation events, I always tell people that, you guys are not working for a bank, you guys are working for a community. Because unless the community flourishes, the bank cannot flourish, and you as an employee cannot flourish. Now, how do we then ensure that the community flourishes? The unique thing about growing economies or developing economies is that about 75 to 80% of the economy consists of SMEs. Now, how do we ensure that these SMEs, that we cater to the SMEs to what they really require? Traditionally, we look at SMEs as being very high risk, and most banks like to stay away from them. But what they fail to see is that is that is actually the backbone of the economy, especially in a country like Sri Lanka. So what can a bank do to help these industries or entities is what has been driving me in the past 3-4 years that I've been back in Sri Lanka. Interestingly, I would say that the last thing that they need in the hierarchy of priorities is money. I would say it's quite funny. I go to these donor forums and I say, we don't need your money. There's enough money going around. It's just that people don't know how to use it. So if you talk to the SMEs, they don't have accounting systems. They don't know how to account for their money. They don't know how to invest. They don't know how to price their goods. The biggest issue is that they don't have access to markets. Now, the bankers can actually help in that instance because they do have access to the larger players in the market. Now, how do we now create a synergy between these so that the smaller players can take advantage of the relationships that the banks have with the larger players, and the banks have a trade-off on the risk because now they're taking the risk of the larger player and not of the smaller player. So that's where we come into value chain financing, supply chain financing, etc. But the bigger role I think that the bank should play is on advisory. That is something that most banks do as a flavor, but not it's not a committed kind of agenda that they have. So in my organization, what we have said is that we believe in sustainability, and our key sustainability initiative is developing entrepreneurs who are sustainable, because that's part of who we are. We are not doing anything extra. We are just ensuring that we are focusing our limited resources into an area where we can really make an impact and they can make an impact on the economy.
Mhm.
So
I'm glad you went there, Shanka, because ultimately the role of a CFO has moved from compliance control fiduciary, that role is still there, but also to an strategic advisory role, right? So
absolutely.
banking also is moving there. At the same time, technology is forcing the banks to have less people and more automation and less human interaction. How are you seeing that balance between technology enabled dehumanization of the process versus the need for human to be there in an advisory capacity to drive sustained economic development?
So I think, Kasturi, the challenge is between digitization and digitalization. I think there's a lot of, especially in a developing economy, there's a lot of room for back-end digitization because there's still a lot of manual work that happens. Now I can still adapt technology and make improvements there. Now digitalization is a different approach, and we have to be very careful because it has to blend into the culture of the country, the demographic makeup, etc. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, for example, we have an aging population, whether we like it or not. A lot of people have migrated and only the parents are left. Now, are they capable of adapting to a fully digitalized banking environment? They cannot, because they take it as an outing to go to the bank and talk to the tellers and talk to the product people. That's part of their routine. Now, by removing them, you are just distancing yourself from your customer, which is something we have to be very careful about. Now, yes, we don't want to go in for more brick and mortar branches. We can have that digital side, but it has to be something. It has to be there's a word for it, is phygital, where you have the physical and the digital and a blend of it. We need to have that balance. When we look at maximizing profit, we have to also ensure that it's sustainable. So what has happened in places like HSBC and Standard Chartered, who by the way are pulling out of Sri Lanka, is they went into full digitalization, and they just alienated themselves from the customers. You can't even go and meet a teller. Call them, there's an automated answering. So people, just distance themselves.
Brings back old memories because I was there when we launched ATM machines and we had to train every customer to use the ATM machine. And we had one customer come to the Ballarat branch one day and said, I left the money on the machine and told it to take care of it, but it's not in my account. He just left it there, and the person coming behind him took his money, right? Even at that time, there was so much challenges for adoption because people are not used to technology. Machines are in English. Not everybody speaks English. So there are layers of complexities here. So given the nature of aging population, because that is also happening in the developed countries, United States is an aging population. Most of the developed West is aging because there are not enough young people. What can banking do to look at the environment differently and attract young people? Because banks have the ability to be a catalyst for that.
So I think we need to move away from how a traditional banker is viewed and make it a more, what shall you say? I suppose the bankers need to re-portray themselves as being more fun rather than, the usual this thing of being the dull intellectual banker. And on the bright side, it is happening. So if you look at my sales team, etc., they are very different from the traditional banker. They go out, they have their fun, they know how to interact with the new generation of customers. It's more about gelling with the Gen Zs and the Gen Xs and whatever the generations are out there now. And the banks need to adapt to how they want to do banking. So today, I have my branches which are devoid of people. We just don't have walk-in customers anymore. So I have the bankers going out to meet customers. Gone are the days where the banker sits in the office and he expects people to come to him. But still, that branch presence is required because that's your identity. And people need to know that such a bank exists, and therefore the branch is still required. But for all practical purposes, the bank is out in the streets, and that is changing how people view banking. So the younger generation don't like to sit behind desks. They like to be out and about and doing things, different things. It is a difficult transition, but we are still managing to attract young people. But turnover, unfortunately, is very, very high.
So you
It's
bring
a
up an
challenge.
interesting perspective, Shankar, because the older people go to the bank. It's an experience, it's an outing, it's a opportunity for human interaction. And culturally, that is a cornerstone of everyday life, right? We come
Yeah,
from a society where you can get dressed as a family or as an individual and go and visit with people, and they'll give you tea and biscuits, and you sit down and talk. You don't need to schedule appointments, right?
absolutely.
So that brought into banking, there's a generation that does that. And then there is this younger generation that wants everything done at their pace, at their place, and with as much technology as possible. How can financial institutions find that right balance? Because not everybody has figured out how to.
Yeah, so I suppose it's something that will be unique to every country or region for each bank that they work in. Now, for example, in Colombo, what we do is we have a separate center called the Light Center, and that's where they can come and do what you just said. Come have a cup of coffee, talk to a banker, make sure that all their transactions taken care of. We also have the service people who cannot do that. We visit them in their homes. So, for example, the son sends a remittance. We take that money and go and visit them, visit the parents at their home and say, here's the money. Is there anything else we can do for you? So we need to find that balance, because in the rural areas it's very different, because there they still view the bank as being person with a certain stature in that community, and they wouldn't even dream of the banker coming to their house. They would always come to see you in your office. Even there you have the younger generation who would want digital access, and then you have the problem that you mentioned, that everything is in English. How do we do that? We have three languages. It's actually a very costly affair for a bank to meet all these requirements. But if we really want to be sustainable in the long run, we need to do that. And that's where it becomes very, very important that we know who our customer is and where do we want to play. We can't be the customer of everybody, and that we need to agree. For a small bank like what I work for, we are very conscious as to where we want to play. We know that we can't be the banker for the blue chip companies. That's not our area. We can't be the banker for the bottommost tier of society either. The banker needs to understand exactly where you want to play, because otherwise it's just going to cost you too much.
So I hear the segmentation need, the requirement to have a conscious segmentation strategy. One of the things that are so uniquely Sri Lankan is the banker and the doctor goes to the house. I remember even when I was at the branch, when certain things happened, I would send one of my cashiers to the customer's house. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, Shanka. That is uniquely Sri Lankan, where a doctor or a banker would go to your house. How can other societies that don't have that capability or don't even think of it as a proper legal or professional way to handle something, how can they explore their options?
Well, in a developed economy, I suppose, thanks to COVID, we are quite familiar with digital communications, like what we're doing now. I think, Kasuri, it all boils down to the culture of the country and the expectation levels. Probably in a Western country, they wouldn't expect it. Therefore, would a bank really want to do that? The expectation levels would be different. So I think it boils down to what I said about segmentation, because each segment of society would expect a certain level of service, and it's the bank here to do that. Now, for example, we have in my previous organization, we used to service the cream of society and one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, I would have not to demean anybody, but I would have the tuk-tuk drivers. Now, the expectations are very different when it comes to service. There's no point in me giving the tuk-tuk driver the service I'm giving this person who is expecting a high level of service, because he's just not expecting it. He might get overwhelmed. I say, oh, this bank is not for me. That's the balance that organizations need to bring in. And again, like I said, each strategy has to be unique to that country and organization and where they operate.
Before I open this to our audience questions, Shankar, I want you to take a moment and let people know how they can get a hold of you. If it's LinkedIn, that is perfectly okay. I will make sure I share that when we release this. And also, as a closing thought, if you could make a positive impact in a developing country with your 30 plus year banking experience and exposure from the West, the Middle East, and across Asia, what would that be?
I think it would be, which I'm already doing now, it's helping organizations who cannot afford a full-time CFO or even full-time access to that skills to strategize, give them that opportunity to be able to do that. So I work with few organizations especially on the data side, helping them identify their customer segment, ensure that their pricing is right, and also give them access to markets. So I kind of leverage the relationships that I have, the experience that I got over the years in how to manage organizations and how to make it sustainable.
Thank you, Shankar. So I am opening this up to our audience. So go ahead. Robin, Nandini, Robin, go ahead.
You know, this is near and dear to my heart, your heart, Cass, and my heart as well. And I'm really delighted to hear your commentary about making baking more of a human experience, and also noting that just the money itself and the top officers themselves are not the core. It's the people that you serve, and the people who are part of your organization are at the core. I think that's really important and valuable. My question would be, how is it that your organization adopted that attitude, and how have you been able to spread throughout your company culture that the people matter, the customer matters, and we need to innovate and do what we can so that the customer feels like they matter, that we're not just out wanting to get their money and manage their money, but we are part of a thriving community in every sense of the word.
Thanks, Robert. That's a great question. I'm happy to say that the large part of that issue in changing culture is already addressed because of the culture in my country. Like Kasturi said, here's where you can visit anybody, you get a cup of tea. It's there. One of my biggest problems in my previous organization was to tell my people that it's good to serve the customer, but the bank also needs to make some money. So it was a kind of reverse problem. But where we are going in our organization right now is to leverage on this relationship that they have with the customer, but move from a product to a solution based approach. Because I'm telling them, don't go and sell a product to a customer. Find out what is it that they want, because the customer wants a solution for a problem that they have. Give them that solution. Don't just try and sell a product. So that's the transition that we are trying to have now. And changing culture is not easy, and you really need to lead from the front by example. And it's a continuous training that we keep doing, and reinforcing that message.
Yeah, I love that, because obviously the bank does need to make money, otherwise it would stop existing, and then it wouldn't be of service to anyone. And so I really like that notion of, what does the customer need, and how can we help solve that need, as opposed to, oh, we have this product, let me just go sell it to you. Let's match the product with the need, and if there's a need that exists, then we'll create a product to help fix it. So that's a beautiful answer. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Go ahead, Nandini.
Hi, thank you so much. What is really striking to me during your conversation was the such similarities between healthcare and the banking, like the same issues that you have, we have. Now we're talking about AI and all these things, and the elderly population having issues with retaining younger staff and maintaining their enthusiasm, because their philosophy of work is not quite conducive to the lifestyles and what our needs in medicine and healthcare. So I was wondering about that, actually, because we're having a lot of trouble retaining younger staff. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on anything that you're doing in your banking industry to make the younger people stay longer and have fruitful and sustainable careers in their field.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, Nandini, and it's not easy, because I come from a very different generation. For me to start understanding what they want and how they think, that there is a big gap, and that's an issue that even my HR is facing. But we have no choice but to try to start understanding what is it that they want. And when I started my career, we would just do what has to be done, and there's no questions asked. But today, for good or for bad, people do have 1,000 questions. And I think one of the approaches that we need to take, and something that we have started on, is what I said, between digitization and digitalization. So we have started digitizing all our backend processes. So that leaves the staff free to do things where they feel that they add value, rather than the routine stuff. The routine stuff then gets taken care of by your automation. That has to a large extent helped, because the younger generation wants to feel they need instant gratification. They feel that whatever they have done, there is an instant response, and they see the results of what they do, because now they're involved in something which is more value added than just paper filling or something that they do at the back end. So that has to a large extent helped, but like I said earlier, it's a very costly affair. But it is a journey that we need to do, because there is no option. It is no longer a nice to have thing that we need to digitize. It is required for our survival, and then adapting AI on top of it. So in my previous organization, we actually did a experiment with AI that was quite rudimentary. But what it helped in my branch was that they were able to identify customers who are liable to leave us in the next 3 months. So now they had a challenge on their hands. Instead of doing your day-to-day banking, now they go and try to engage with the customer and keep the customer happy, so that they don't lose the customer. So that was a break from the normal banking that they would do. So these little things that we do to ensure that the job is more enriching and fulfilling has helped retain some of them, and it also helps them identify, is this what I really want to do? Because when we came into the industry, it was not a choice of, is this what I want to do? Because that's what you had to do. So we didn't have that many options. Now these days, people have a lot of options, and then you retain who is really cut out for this role.
Thank you so much. Very insightful. I like the instant gratification and figuring out purpose to help to make them have the choice of their purpose within whatever they're doing. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nandini. Shanka, this has been an absolute delight. We could talk for hours as two fellow CFOs and bankers, in my case, recovering banker. But unfortunately, time flies. So as I bring this to a close, I want to thank you for having this conversation, not just with me, but also engaging with our live audience. I know the Goldilocks community is going to appreciate your message, your perspective, and I truly believe the Sri Lankan culture and the way we show up in society to serve, regardless of our generational differences, are very unique. And that too is a perspective others will appreciate having. So thank you so much, Shankar. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to our audience out there, keep looking at how the world is evolving around you. Look at how your purpose aligns with the evolving world and find your niche to make your mark. Because nothing around us is static, and where the world is going is not yet imagined. Use your imagination to drive your future. And as you drive your future, make sure you build a relationship with your bank, with your banker, because your banker is your ally, and that allyship is necessary for you to build your dream, build your sustainable future, and take care of both your family and your community.